Hey, it's Nicholas with the Backyard TARDIS here with another Random Thoughts podcast. This time we are going to do the Red5network May Roundup of 2022. Just kind of giving my thoughts on that. Yes, it's the first day of August now, and I'm finally getting to these notes, slowly getting caught up back on track. But I really like what I have for this one because this is a little bit some more deeper discussion. So first, right off the bat, we got WSTR, and they talked about the Netflix model and how that affects Disney Plus and Star Wars and Marvel, and they were kind of talking about that. And essentially, what the Netflix model originally was to basically pay everybody else for the content, get everybody to cut cable, and just to become this juggernaut. And Netflix has had the model of constantly spending more money to make money and constantly getting investors. And then we're seeing that start to catch up with Netflix for two reasons. One, you can't do that forever. You can't constantly be in a state of growth. And that's what they've done, is they show such positive. That's what social medias do too. Like Twitter. Twitter constantly runs at a loss. But they make so much money, but they cost more to run than they're making. But it's growing every year how much they make. So they get investors to pay the debt to constantly go, in the hopes at some point some big company is going to look at Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or just all these different things, and they go, wow, that's worth something. They spend a bunch of money on it. When they find out that it's like this scheme of constantly spending money, more money than you're making, but your company, because of that, grows so much profit one year to the next year of what you're bringing in, that it looks like there's something there. And Netflix has been doing this for a long time. That can't last forever. You eventually hit a cap, like this is the most you're going to get, and suddenly you have to be profitable. Unfortunately, that's hitting for Netflix around the exact same time as all these other studios are finally taking notice of what Netflix is doing and pulling all their content off of Netflix. You've got Disney, you've got Warner Media, you've got CBS All Access, which is now Paramount Plus. You've got Peacock now. Each one of these are the major TV stations that own their own chunk or quarter of the giant back catalog of that in truth is what made Netflix Netflix. Netflix has had handful of really good series, but they were never based on their original series. You went there because you wanted to watch The Office and Seinfeld and Friends and all the different seasons of Star Trek, and it used to be that was all on just Netflix, and everything was on Netflix. You wanted to watch a movie, you could scroll, and it became the problem. There were too much. Now, so many of that stuff that people just binged over and over and over again have been removed because they're going to the respective networks that own those properties, own streaming service. So that's hitting Netflix. At the same time, they've kind of hit the cap, so they can't spend more on originating. Now they're saving money by not paying an exorbitant amount to still have The Office or Friends or as those leave, they were paying large amounts of money. But what does this mean for Disney? Well, Disney has taken a similar approach in that they're spending more money to make content than the service actually makes. Unfortunately, in my opinion, they're not quite doing it up to par with, say, something like HBO. Now, HBO Max, I've been very critical of how HBO Max streamed out. AT&T completely botched that. See, they bought HBO and they bought Warner Media. HBO was already like a premier higher end streaming service that was known specifically for its own original shows. So people who bought that were buying it for specific content. Now, the fact that somebody who pioneered streaming service, who pioneered this original content, so poorly rolled out. HBO Max has kind of really been all over the place. Hopefully, now that it's got Discovery Media, and Discovery Plus is its own streaming service that nobody thought they wanted, but everybody's saying, wow, how amazing it is, maybe combining them together. But I think a big problem is Disney went cheap for their price. They were basically trying to cut Netflix out. They were trying to be the cheaper alternative. And as Netflix is increasing its price, trying to meet this demand while its library is shrinking, Disney has like this huge built-in. I mean, if you're a parent, the sheer amount of money you would save from just constantly buying Disney movies on whatever the newest format is, to just owning instant access to that catalog and being it like, I can go, oh, you know, my daughter's never seen The Aristocrats. I should show her The Aristocrats. Cats. Boom, it's there. It's instant. It's available. Now, there are certain things that it's kind of like, why is it not there? Why don't we have the Buzz Lightyear Saturday morning cartoon? I mean, some of it's legal rights, some of it's other stuff, but it just, potentially, there's all that Disney goodness of the past is there, everything they're putting out currently, and now that they've bought up Star Wars, they've bought up Marvel, they've bought up Pixar, and they bought up, I don't know if it's National Geographic or it's one of those nature channels that they bought up, and so all of that's on there. If you're into sports, there's that whole thing. So you have quite a bit that comes with Disney Plus. But all of that costs money. And some of that stuff is also put on television, so you're making up some of the money there. But the original shows, when you think of like HBO Max put out like Game of Thrones and Westworld and some of that, but like they didn't have them like constantly running back to back, but we seem like we have a Marvel and Star Wars thing back to back to back throughout the year. And I think that's a mistake, because none of them are getting done to the point of which I feel like they should. Like, these should be event shows, and I wouldn't mind only getting 1 or 2 Star Wars shows a year if they were like major events and it was movie level quality. And the fact of like they're so afraid of people coming on, doing the free month trial, and then like dumping the service. But I think there's enough people that, like, how many people still had HBO Max when HBO Max became a thing? How many years had Game of Thrones ended, and people were still subscribed just for that, paying like $15 a month just because they were so into Game of Thrones, they subscribed to it, and then they just, despite being so upset about that last season, never found it within themselves to cancel the service. The time it goes by the wayside. How many people have Netflix and they've just stopped using Netflix because they have all these other services, but haven't gone in and figured out their password to delete Netflix and cancel their membership? So I think that's the big thing, is that creating a bunch of shovelware, which is kind of what Netflix is doing. Netflix is constantly just throwing stuff at the wall, hoping for a big thing. I'm really sad that they're cutting a lot of their animation budget, because those have been some of the things I've been enjoying the most. But they're making too many of them, and they're really expensive, and they don't see the return. Because one, it's a niche thing, adult animation. You have adults who won't watch animation, and you're cutting out some of the kid marks, because once again, they're making this stuff, but they're not always making it kid-friendly, and because of that, you miss out on a bunch of that. And as a parent, I don't feel like anything that's on Netflix I could sit down and let my child watch. Even if I knew the property, like Transformers, anything like that, if I didn't watch it first, I'm not going to let my child watch it, because Netflix has a tendency to take shows that start out incredibly okay and then just add stuff to it because they can, because it's not rated. That's one of the things that I really am concerned about with Disney adding the R-rated content to Disney Plus. I really wish that, they have like the Marvel, the DC, they have that. I really wish they would just make Hulu like a tab, like you're on Disney Plus and you could switch over to the Hulu menu if you have the password, but keep that separated. Like, this is the adult content over here. Don't mix them through and then have me be able to put a filter on the whole thing. I don't want it to become like Netflix, where the majority of stuff on Disney Plus becomes this mature content. Because it's the one thing I've liked about Disney Plus is, while I still examine everything that my daughter watches, I make sure that it's all stuff up to my level, my par. I'm really cautious about making sure that it is something that she likes. But we see what's going on with Netflix right now. And while Disney owns its back catalog, the same thing can happen with Disney. They can only spend money to make money, so to speak. They can only outspend everybody for so long. Now, Disney has the pockets. They can do this a lot longer than a lot of other people. And they could put a company like Netflix out of business just by outspending them. But realistically, there's diminishing returns. The more they just make it. But if they made it like an event, if, every time a Mandalorian season came out, maybe if we had Mandalorian and then one other show every year, and they were really big, and they really spent the budget on it, because that's like Book of Boba Fett. That really felt like the budget wasn't there. Like, they needed a couple more episodes, and some episodes the special effects looked really good, and other episodes it looked really bad, and it was really like any TV show. Like when you look at like Stargate, Star Trek, all these TV shows, they have like bottle episodes where there's a lot of recaps and flashbacks to previous episodes. Maybe, like on Star Trek, they'd have like, oh, this is an episode on a ship that takes place almost entirely in sets we've already made. So we don't have to go to an alien planet because we don't have the budget. There is a clear sign that certain episodes of Book of Boba Fett were considered less important, and so they were given a much smaller portion of the budget than some of the other episodes. And that's sad, because, like, well, as much as I loved Luke Skywalker and Book of Boba Fett, I really feel like the reason why we didn't get a lot of the Boba Fett we wanted was because so much of the money went to making CGI de-aging Luke Skywalker face look so much better. It did. But, like, that was like the whole budget for the show ended up going to that. And so I really wish they would do more. And I've come to realize, like with Marvel, I think they should stick to more of the street level stuff. Now, they've announced Daredevil coming up, so that looks like a good idea for putting on Disney Plus. But yeah, that's just kind of my thought. Like, this business model that they have, I think Disney Plus is going to have to go up in price. And I do think that the 30 days after the movie, or 45 days, whatever it is, after movies in theater, coming to Disney Plus is a huge incentive for Disney Plus. It skews how box office, because a movie could not do as well at the box office, but if it also retains customers on a streaming service, there's a value there. And so it'd be interesting if they would release how many people watch the first week a Disney movie comes onto Disney Plus. And, if you were to add that with the movie ticket sales, like how many views are you getting of that movie, which in turn cranks into the merchandise campaign. Okay, the other thing WSTR talked about was DC New Frontiers. I absolutely loved the animated stuff, that the DCEU, or the not the DCEU, the DC animated movie universe, and the stuff that though this is out of it, but the New Frontiers line that they started in DC, Really, I love that retro feel, that like going back and putting a little bit of today and a little bit of yesterday all together so that you just kind of have that retro nostalgia. That to me is big, and I really loved how they did the New Frontiers, Superman, and like all of them coming together. I really think that had really good commentary also on superheroes and just kind of that. So I think that's really something deep, and I would like for them to do more. You look back at like the DC animated universe, Batman. One of the things I loved about that was it was constantly felt like it was set in the 60s, and then it was felt like it was set now. Like you look at like the cop cars were older style, there was certain different technologies, but then other technologies were there, different things were there, and it was this mishmash of kind of noir and modern that made that just such a wonderful universe. And I think that is a great place for DC to be. Don't try to set it in the present like the MCU, but don't also necessarily make it a timepiece. Merge the two, create its own universe. This world lives somewhere between now and then, and bring those storylines together. You know, have some of the modern technology, some of the old warplanes and different things going on, but you know, you could have cell phones and Nazis in the same thing. You know, combine some of that. Just kind of a neat look at things. Science Fictionary. Congratulations on 100 episodes of the Science Fictionary podcast. What a milestone. And you asked, what are some of your favorite ones? Well, of course, I could be biased and I could say the ones that I appeared on. You know, the fan reading of these Pillars of Adventure and the fan of the Pillars of Fantasy. But honestly, it was the Pillars of Sci-Fi that I liked the most. I loved your going into the books and stuff like that. It's caused me to dig a lot deeper. But then I liked when you did the listeners list, and just reacting and getting to have that interchange of the community was so great. I've also, of course, loved your Mount Rushmore series. That's fun. I still want to do like the 80s, 90s Mount Rushmore of TV action stars. I think that would be a cool one to do. Even though I think in my head it's a foregone conclusion of who's up on that mountain. So if you want to do that episode, I'd join you for that because I have some strong opinions on that one. But then I think the other thing was seeing, you know, David go through the Star Trek, you know, being a sci-fi fan, not having been into Star Trek, getting that a little bit with the X-Files, but more with his reaction to Star Trek because I know Star Trek, so I'm understanding what he's that, and I love experiencing franchise he hasn't done before. So you know, I look forward to getting to the point when like maybe you get him into Stargate and have him fall in love with Stargate because I know he would. Okay, Scarif Scuttlebutt. Asking the deep questions here. Why we wear masks. You know, and the different masks we wear. And, you know, I definitely wear a mask in a lot of ways. I have different personalities from that. And I don't want to say that I have like a secret life or anything like that. But I have, this is me, how I present myself to the public. This is me, how I present ones when I'm you know, in my nerdyverse, but how I present myself when I'm on the job as a locksmith are different. How I present myself with my family, but even to myself, I think you wear a mask sometimes. There are certain things about yourself that you don't like, and I think a lot of that is inherent imperfection. You know, it's a person of faith, and I'll get that into the next one too. I believe that we've all inherited imperfection, and because of that, there are things about us that we don't like. We can't help but feel that way, but we don't like, and so we wear a mask to change that sometimes. And even sometimes we wear the mask when just by ourselves. We wear the mask because we want to believe that we're not that way. We in effect fool ourselves. And the mask can, in some ways, it can be a protection. Because I do think that when people speak unfiltered, just exactly what their impulse feelings, things do not come out right. They do not feel what the actual person, what you're feeling in a moment, trying to contextualize that into words, is not necessarily what you believe, how you feel. And I think a good example of that is Twitter. There's an ambiguity to Twitter. A lot of Twitter, while they put on an avatar mask, they actually lit the mask down, so to speak. They show some of their true selves. They just spit what's in their mind, their raw emotions out onto Twitter. And it's not really what they believe. Like when people say, stuff like, wow, if you like that movie, then you're a waste of a person, or some stuff that people will shout and say and do is not necessarily what they mean. So some people, they put up a careful mask because they're in the public and they don't want to say the wrong thing. Other people go onto social media and they use the mask of social media to hide who they are, but they express that stuff out. And oftentimes, if you were to meet that person, what you would expect from their Twitter or whatever is not the person that you would find, because the real person, I think, is somewhere in between the mask that they put on for people to say and who they are, completely and entirely unfiltered. Because a lot of times those thoughts, those feelings aren't necessarily who we are or what we actually believe. They're unfiltered, they're unprocessed. The savior complex. Oh, this one was good. Once again, I think as somebody who's Christian, who believes in the Bible, it says that we have specifically the need to be saved. Like the Israelites, the Jews, they had all these sacrifices. What was the purpose? To help them appreciate and realize the need to be saved. So it's only natural that we would have in our media the need to be saved. That is inherently obvious with mankind, especially when you look at the world. There is a need for a savior, so to speak. We look around and we are just messing things up. So the savior complex of needing like this hero that makes the ultimate sacrifice to save us, it's generation of hope. So that's why that appeals to us, because on a deep layer, we understand that we need saving. I want to congratulate, before I move on to the next one, you had Rebel Force Radio on, the biggest Star Wars podcast, came in and hung out with Scarif. And then back to back, you had Wookieepedia come on. Wookieepedia came on your podcast. How amazing is that? Like the largest Star Wars website out there. I mean, I don't even think Lucasfilm's website is visited by Star Wars fans as Wookieepedia. So then you combine those, and I was like, okay, what are you going to have next? Is Star Wars Theory going to come on? The biggest Star Wars YouTuber? Because that seems like what would be next. We need to make that happen. Moving on. converSWations. You did an episode on New Gen Epic Sci-Fi Universe. And this has me very intrigued. I've found, outside of what was given on your podcast, I found it really hard to get information on it. That's one of the things with some of these smaller projects, is getting that. But this sci-fi universe, I really think that, and even though this is being done, I believe, by Marvel, it's something completely separate from the Marvel typical universe. And it interests me. This project really does interest me. So I'm definitely going to be checking it out. You definitely sold me on this. And had definitely some X-Men vibes, but a little bit. And I would say, I want to say it was Point of No Return. Anyways, there's a audio drama that kind of had a similar vibe to it that Christopher Judge played on. And it just kind of one of those things that, like, I think we're about to see the renaissance of a lot of new comic book worlds come about. We kind of had that in the 90s between like Dark Horse and Image Comics and stuff like that. But, then the big companies came about them. But I think we're right around the time when we're going to see a lot of new come out. War of the Stars. I think it's first time covering you guys on here. The Star Wars parodies. And you're going through them all. I have to say, probably the funniest one for me, and you kind of joke because you hadn't seen it, but Thumb Wars. Thumb Wars is absolutely hilarious. And one of the reasons Thumb Wars is hilarious, and Bat Thumb and all the different Thumb movies, is they find such a good way of finding things about the movies that don't make sense. My favorite thing in all of Star Wars is the Death Star trench run. And Thumb Wars makes such a good joke making fun of that. Is, they're coming in and, they describe it as a trench with a big, and they're describing the whole trench run and all that. And they're like, why would they put a big button where we could just hit it and blow it up? I don't know. If I were to build a Death Star, I would have left that out. Of course, Rogue One answered that question. But, anyways, they're coming at it from space, three-dimensional space. Why didn't the whole fleet just fly straight at the button, all firing? Why did they go down the long trench? Why didn't they just come at the spear from the point they needed to fire at? And they make light of that. That had never occurred to me whenever, and it doesn't take it away from me in the movie. I still enjoy the thing, but it never occurred to me the flaw in the logic there. And they have the guy, and he's like, almost there, almost there. If I had to do this over again, I would have started a lot closer to the button. And, just the fact that, like, they're flying through past all these turrets, but they're, instead of starting right by where they need to shoot, really kind of just took me back. So the funny jokes, and Ooby Dooby Scooby Banooby. Loved some of that, and You Must Be the Crybaby. Loved me some Thumb Wars. And it's short. Go enjoy it. All Star Wars fans should see this. Okay, Salty Nerd Podcast. You guys had Addam Baldwin on, and I love that he called Vader the Bad Matt because he didn't like Firefly. And to me, Firefly is just it's cowboys in space. And sometimes it doesn't have to make sense. Not that I'm saying the show doesn't make sense, but sometimes it's just cool to have the mashup. Just like I think it's cool to do something like dinosaurs or aliens with cowboys set in the past. Like, we don't have to, oh yes, of course that didn't happen, but it's just fun. Be a little kid playing with your different toys. I think, Firefly, like the idea that they're settling these planets, they've taken these animals there. Maybe they took them as babies. Maybe they genetically cloned them there. Whatever. They get them to these worlds to establish a food, so that they have these animals and that and all this stuff that they're going to need to survive, because these colonies are pretty much made and then abandoned, and then they're on their own. So yes, technology exists, but these are settlements. And you look at America. When the British and the Spaniards and all that came over to America, they didn't live with the same technological level and things that they had over there. We were kind of the hicks over in America to the British because they were so much more advanced to us, because they couldn't haul all that over. But they brought a lot of the different types of food. There's a lot of foods that we think of as staples here, but they weren't even foods that naturally grow in America. We brought them. Animals we brought to America that are kind of the mainstay of our diet doesn't even come from here. So to me, bringing that on a ship, bringing it in space, it makes sense. You talked about the movie Soldier, and this to me, I don't watch a lot of rated R movies, but this is a movie that is probably my favorite Kurt Russell movie. I say that I really love Stargate, but this movie had such an impact on me that I just have always loved the emotion played in there of just being this thing for the system, this robot of a person, that he was built to be a soldier and he became outdated and thrown out like the trash. Of the movies you just get, like, this one really connects with me. You guys did an interview with Kevin J. Anderson of the Star Wars and Dune book fame. Now, I haven't read his Dune books. I'm not that far. I'm working through the Dune books. I kind of got a little sidetracked by Isaac Asimov. I decided that was older. Needed to do all those first, and then I would move on and consume Dune. But I'm looking forward to that because I really love his Star Wars books. And one of the things I love is how when he came in and he had, the Thrawn trilogy coming out, and you had the comics coming out, and they went completely different directions. And instead of going his own direction, or even listening to him to say, oh, Timothy Zahn's books, is more what we're going to stick with those. And this is all kind of being developed simultaneously with his stuff, so he actively doesn't know where their storylines are going, but he made the effort to make the contact, to get that other information, and to try to merge both storylines into that. And I feel if he hadn't done that, when he did that, that we would not have the expanded universe that we had. We would have had the expanded universe constantly retconning itself. I mean, there's some disjointedness there, especially after the prequels came out, because they decanonized some of it and added other wrinkles to it. But up until that point, it was a flowing, expanded universe that followed each other. And I feel like, how he went, you already had two things going different ways, and had he gone his yet separate third way, we would have never had that. But because he took these and said, hey, this is how we're going to make these two work with each other, it is an amazing thing. So I really, truly appreciated that. Okay. You talked about Ready Player One. Now, I love this movie, and it's not just because it's the first big screen appearance of Sonic the Hedgehog. It's not because it's got Ruby Rose on there, or all that, or all the other things, or the DeLorean, or the King Kong, Godzilla. You've got Rexy from Jurassic Park. So many good stuff in there. Just insane. It's all of it together. It is a love letter to Spielberg by Spielberg. It's better than the book, in my opinion. The book's a little bit dry. I couldn't get into it. But Ready Player One is a celebration of everything we love, of the 80s. And I find it funny that, for you guys, it's like, it's just too much. That's the point of it. It's supposed to be member berries, the movie. It's supposed to be, as nerds, like, if that was a video game we could get into, we would be absolutely loving it and be just glued to it. And that's what it is. It's a world where all these IPs can mix and play and all that, and all the fun you want to have, you can have. And it's a bummer Star Wars couldn't be in there. I wish there was Star Wars stuff in there. And a little more, like Star Wars and Star Trek, like seeing both of those next to each other, I think would have made it cool. But it's just interesting how all of that works and combines together, and the feelings and emotions that come up. And it has a very Spielberg type story to go along with it. So to me, I also look at my 80s video games. I mean, how many video games were there about getting sucked into the video? I think of like Kid Chameleon and some of these different ones. Like that concept, Tron, these different things a concept of being sucked into the video game. And that's literally what this was, but done in a way that can't possibly be done anywhere else. So to me, this is one of Spielberg's greatest movies. And I know he wasn't as involved. I know this is one that people say, oh, Spielberg practically did this with one eye closed, let other people do it while he just kind of sat back. But I really feel like this movie is a celebration of everything that when we look back and we talk about how much we love the 80s movies, that's what this movie is. It is like a podcast in visual form. It's just a love letter to that thing. I just love it. Now, something I think you guys, since you checked out all these, I would say check out Sword Art Online. And it's an anime. In fact, probably for your guys' humor and because you have less time, I would say check out Sword Art Online Abridged. It is basically like the idea of everybody gets virtual reality into WoW, like a game like that. And then all of a sudden the creator pops up one day and says, hey, big surprise, none of you can leave. And if you die in the game, your body will be killed in real life. And the only way to get out is to beat the game. You have to work together. And like so many of them are just like noobs that are dying. And it's all about like this young boy. It's like he's just so superior to everybody in skills and just has a mouth, and he chats like you see young kids chat on this. It's just really good, really fun, and it plays with a lot of the tropes of those kind of games, like WoW, like EverQuest, and all those kind of games. So now, at the end, doing as we've been doing, talking about some of the movie shows that came out during this time. This one, I'm only going to talk about movies. First, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. I've talked a little bit about this previously, back in May, but this is a very interesting meta look at the animation industry. It actually doesn't paint Disney in a good light, which is kind of strange. Disney made it. It really points out how wrong they did the voice actor of Peter Pan. And yet it makes him the villain of the thing, but it also makes Disney the villain. It talks about like the whole thing about CGI, deadpan face characters, lots of different interesting things that it makes fun of. The Zipper and Gadget thing. Well, I did not like that. I loved that the Allstate guy was the voice of Zipper. That was hilarious. And I loved how they did the, when they're in the real world, they have normal voice actor, like stars that are playing them. But when they're playing their character on TV, they're doing a voice, hey, Chip, or Zipper, but that's not their real voices. And that was how they got around having Famous Star, but not like taking away from that. And I thought that was a really interesting way. I almost wonder if Illumination will do something similar with Chris Pratt as Mario. Like they'll say, oh, they'll have like the actual voice of Mario, voice him in some lines, and then like it'll be cut, and it's like, oh, now he's just talking like Chris Pratt. That could be something. But like the big thing, Ugly Sonic in this, I want to see Ugly Sonic, Uglier Crime, a new FBI Sonic crossover series. I want to see that. Like even if it's like a joke, like webisode thing, I want to see that. I love how they made Ugly Sonic even uglier, and I love just how they made that moment in history like just so good. This truly is the successor to Roger Rabbit. I don't think it is as good as Roger Rabbit. I don't think it, but it is really this generation's Roger Rabbit. And I don't know. There's very mixed feelings on it. Now, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. This is one that just about every Red 5 Network podcast did a podcast on. and I have not had a chance to listen to most of them. I did listen to ATSW, the Escape Pods, one on that, and I actually found out that they had something that they did as a message to me that I should do a reaction to that I haven't yet, just because I was avoiding that episode because I wanted no Doctor Strange spoilers. And Doctor Strange, just a little backstory, I did not like the first Doctor Strange. I actually disliked that movie greatly. One of my lower tier MCU movies. Really loved WandaVision. I see a lot of people upset with how this movie went, and to me, Wanda is the Scarlet Witch, which is like it's the yin to the yang of the Phoenix Force. It is literally one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel universe, and it possesses, so to speak, her. It's not. So it's a combining of entities, because she's reading the Darkhold, and she has this potential that is unlocked. So I don't look at it as putting a woman over a man. I think a lot of people are just too raw about that. I also, she's a villain for the most part in the comics. She has been on the good guys team, but she's mostly on the villains team or been an anti-hero. And so, like, everybody's shocked that they made her the villain, and I thought that was a horrible. No, I ultimately think she started out the villain. She tried being good, but she goes back to being the villain, and it's not her. She's being corrupted by the Darkhold, and the absolute power corrupts absolutely. They play a lot into that. Like, she is extremely powerful, but she's lost all reason. She's trying to get her kids back. Like, she's not even contemplating the fact that she has to kill their real mother to become their mother, and what that would affect, how they would reject her. Like, none of that's coming, because she's completely lost over to the Darkhold, and it's using the whole concept of the kids to take over her. I really like this. Is it Chavez or whatever character? They didn't go a whole lot into her. She was fine in the movie. I didn't feel like she in any way stole the show from Doctor Strange. I very much feel like it was a movie that had a lot of cool, unique looks. Doctor Strange got that. But I loved seeing, Scarlet Witch as the villain, and having her come to her full power and do all that, and really getting to see her wreck shop with, like, spoilers, Professor X and Black Bolt and all these other characters from other movies. Really good. And for all those that are like, oh yeah, powerful, like, you have the Carter as I don't know, is it Captain UK or what but the female version of Captain America, and she comes in and she's trying to, I can do this all day, and nope, you can't. It really makes Scarlet a threat, and I think she makes a great villain. And a lot of people are like, they didn't like the ending of that because, like, she's just forgiven. She's not just forgiven. She's, Monica Rambeau is trying to understand her. She realizes there's other things that's going on here, and she needs her help. So she does that. But at the end of the day, they all realize none of them can touch Wanda. She's way more powerful than them. And so they're just too afraid to. And it's why she initially thinks that's why Doctor Strange is there. I thought the whole thing, how it all worked, I thought it worked out really well. A lot of people are saying it's not well put together, that it's a mishmash and doesn't make sense. I didn't get that. I thought it really went well together. Is it my favorite MCU movie? No, but it's definitely closer to the top than it is to the bottom. It's definitely leagues better than the last Doctor Strange movie. So I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it a lot for Doctor Strange. I enjoyed it a lot for Scarlet Witch. I thought they were really good representations of, like, this cosmic being that has now, attached itself to her and is helping Wanda, um, leading her down this dark path, and seeing Wanda really go down this dark path is a comic series that I wanted to see. I wanted to see that, and we got to see it. And I think that, to me, this is what the X-Men movies have tried twice with the Phoenix Force and failed, but we see here work in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. And I really feel that a lot of people are just so burnt out on Marvel right now that they can't see how good this movie is. And they talk about all the studio interference because we have to do this or include that because of stuff coming up. It's a Sam Raimi film, but, why aren't they just letting Sam Raimi make his film? Well, that's part of a connected universe. Like, they're supposed to be able to tell him, hey, like, this character has to be alive at the end and this character has to be dead. You need a scene where this happens because we need this character to go on to do this. That's not bad. That's what the MCU, like, that's like the creative stuff that the MCU should be having. Let the director do the thing, but, like, here's the guidelines. This is where the universe is going. You're writing this story in part of this thing. That's not bad click by numbers, studio by committee running. That is Kevin Feige running the whole universe and making sure it connects, which is something people are accusing the MCU of not having a thorough thread, which is why I think they just announced what Phase 6 ends with. Just so we realize this is the goal. We are working towards something. We do have it mapped out and planned, just like we did before. Maybe even more so than before, even though you feel it's not connected. It was a lot easier to connect the Avengers assembling than I think what they're doing now. They're getting into really complex, deep comics that are the kind of stuff that throws a lot of nerds out of it. That those, like, comics are weird. They're too weird. And they like the more basic stuff like you would see in a cartoon or something. And whether or not that's going to work in the movies and it's going to capture the large general audience, I don't know. I am excited to see some of it. Some of it is C-tier characters that I don't care about, but others I really do. And I really feel like we're just so raw right now, but on one hand, we're accusing Marvel of being too interfering, not letting creators make the movie they want to make. They're doing too much. And the other time we have this other camp, sometimes it's the same people saying, these movies aren't interconnected. Where's the Marvel connectivity that we loved before? Why aren't you interfering more is basically what they're asking. And so I find it weird that both of these things are a complaint at the same time by a lot of the same people. And I really think that it's just a few recent creative decisions, a real recent few statements by the people working at Marvel that has got everybody so riled up. And I also think that Marvel catches a lot of the baggage that comes from Star Wars. And I've already seen the same thing happening for Stargate. So Amazon has Stargate, and everyone's like freaking out because of how Lord of the Rings TV show is being handled, and they're freaking out about Stargate. But Amazon has been very clear about letting their directors do what they want and not interfering. And Disney has, on the greater scale, been really good about Star Wars. Lucasfilm wants to do this, Lucasfilm does what they do. Pixar wants to do this, Pixar does what it does. Marvel over here, Marvel does what it does, and it doesn't overimpose a continual agenda. Now, people can argue that, this, that, but there's a clear difference of philosophy of how Marvel runs things and how Lucasfilm runs things. However, everybody seems to think that they want to pin MCU as going the route of Star Wars. Oh, it's all about the message, it's all about this. Well, they're really good at adapting the comics. And what people, I think, are more complaining about is that they don't like where the comics went, and they're continuing to follow the comics. And I understand that. I do. But I don't think that they're making the same mistakes as Star Wars. And I think everybody being raw and constantly trying to point out the mistakes of Star Wars and apply them to Marvel is a bit off. It's got its own issues. It's doing some things that I don't agree with. But at the same time, I don't think it is a repeat of the mismanagement of Star Wars. I think it is its own entity. And instead of just, it is popular to hate anything and everything Disney does right now. I look at them as separate companies. The MCU is a separate company from Lucasfilm, in my eyes. I do not, yes, they're both owned by the mouse, but I don't consider them the same. And so that's just kind of my thoughts. Anyways, what are your thoughts on some of these topics? How are you doing? What are you loving right now? What are you not loving right now? Let me know down in the comments, and I will catch you in the next video.